Good to have you with us. Despite the meeting between U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and senior North Korean official Kim Jong-un being cancelled this week, President Trump has said he is happy with how things are going with North Korea. The State Department has also simply explained the cancellation as a scheduling issue, but it remains difficult to brush off concerns that the denuclearization talks might be breaking down. We'll further explore those concerns later in the show, but first we catch up on the latest headlines with Devin Whiting at the News Center. Devin?
Hi, Jang-ho. South Korean President Moon Jae-in is continuing a series of trips around the country to boost regional economies. Today, for his second destination, he went to Pohang, a port city in Gyeongsang-Buk-do province, where he stressed that now is the time to find a new growth engine for the country. He noted that the region has been the country's leading exporter of textiles, electronics, and steel, but stressed that fierce international competition and protectionism recently have made it absolutely necessary for Korea's traditional growth engines to innovate. He pledged to support Gyeongsang-Buk-do province by enabling local companies, universities, and research institutes to work together to prepare for the fourth industrial revolution, and also to support the region financially. While in Pohang, President Moon also visited the fourth-generation light source accelerator, a facility used by researchers to analyze extremely fine particles. There have been reports that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un might visit Russia as soon as this month, but the Kremlin is suggesting otherwise. According to several Russian news outlets, the Kremlin's foreign affairs advisor Yuri Ushakov said Wednesday that he hopes Chairman Kim's visit will be possible next year. It was announced last month by the Kremlin that President Vladimir Putin had invited Kim to Russia and that the time and place of their meeting was being worked out. Americans went to the polls Tuesday to elect new representatives to Congress, and history was made in the House, which now has a member, its first Korean-American woman, Republican Young Kim. Lee Seung-jae reports.
A historic day at the 2018 U.S. midterm elections, as California's 39th congressional district election saw Republican Young Kim beat Democrat Gil Cisneros, garnering 51.3% of the votes. Kim becomes the first Korean-American woman to be elected into Congress and the first Korean-American in 20 years to be elected. It was an emotional victory for the self-made woman who won the tight race.
Despite all of the millions of dollars that came at me, this is one election that we can prove that we cannot buy ourselves into a seat.
Ed Royce, the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, announced his retirement from California's 39th district seat in January and had endorsed Kim since then.
I want to share with you that over that span of time, in my opinion, from the people that I've met in public service, no one has ever worked as hard as Young Kim.
Young Kim worked for Royce for 2 decades, first when he was a state senator and then in Congress. Kim let the Korean community in her district know she will take care of them, even though it may take time.
There may be times when I cannot work for the Korean community because I have to succeed in mainstream society, so I can give back to the Korean community later.
She will now represent the district, which includes parts of Los Angeles, Orange, and San Bernardino counties, which is 2/3 Asian and Latino. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And U.S. stocks saw big gains on Wednesday after the midterm elections, investors apparently hoping for some cooperation between President Trump and the Democrats now in control of the House. Hong Yu has more.
U.S. stocks rallied on Wednesday after the midterm election results showed that the Democrats had won control of the House of Representatives and the Republicans had kept control of the Senate. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closed out 545 points on Wednesday, led by gains in United Health and Apple. The S&P 500 gained 2.1% and the Nasdaq Composite rose 2.6%. According to CNBC, investors expect Trump's business-friendly policies to continue, but some also said the Democrats' control of the House will act as a check against some of President Trump's more destructive economic policies, such as trade war with China. The Wall Street Journal reported that experts believe the expected results of the midterm election removed investors' concern. The New York Stock Exchange continued its rally after U.S. President Donald Trump mentioned possible cooperation with the Democrats in the House of Representatives. Phil Blancato, CEO of Ladenburg Thalmann Asset Management, said this is the best buying opportunity for investors before the year end. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
U.S. Forces Korea has a new commander, General Robert Abrams, who replaces General Vincent Brooks, who's held the post since April 2016. At the change of command ceremony Thursday at Camp Humphreys, General Abrams said the relationship between the two allies remains unshakable and is based on mutual trust. And he said they will continue to work together to maintain peace and security on the Korean Peninsula. The new commander faces a series of challenges, including the eventual transfer of wartime operational control from the U.S. to South Korea and maintaining defense readiness amid diplomatic efforts with North Korea. The first general meeting was held this morning of the committee tasked with implementing the economic aspects of President Moon's new Southern policy. It was led by President Moon's special economic advisor, Kim Jong-un, who explained the achievements of the Moon administration's policy over the past year. He pledged that the Commission will put all its efforts into increasing human resource exchanges between Korea and South and Southeast Asia in the hope that 15 million people will travel between Korea and ASEAN countries every year by the year 2020. He also said the Commission will seek to create the basis for mutually beneficial and forward-looking economic cooperation to boost bilateral trade with South and Southeast Asia and build a peaceful and secure environment in the region. South Korean and Japanese civic groups have joined forces to sue a Japanese company for damages for forcing Koreans to work for it during World War II. At a press conference in Seoul on Wednesday, the civic group said that by the end of the year, they will appoint a joint legal team comprising roughly 20 lawyers to represent the people used by Nippon Steel and Sumitomo Metal Corporation as forced laborers. The move comes after South Korea's Supreme Court ruled that the Japanese steelmaker has to pay compensation worth some $87,000 to each of 4 Korean victims, but there are many more victims than that. The civic groups will be contacting the individuals eligible to file complaints. In the U.S., Samsung Electronics has unveiled some aspects of its highly anticipated foldable smartphone. Although it didn't give an exact release date, American news outlets are reporting that it's expected to come out sometime next year. Ko Ryun-hee has more.
At a Samsung developer conference in San Francisco Wednesday, the tech giant previewed parts of its upcoming smartphone with a foldable display. Although the finished product wasn't released yet, Samsung gave an overview of the new mobile display technology called the Infinity Flex Display. It provides an improved multitasking experience because the larger screen allows users to use 3 applications at once.
When it's open, it's a tablet, offering a big screen experience. Thank you.
Developers got a clear picture of what the phone is going to look like because the user interface which will be applied to the phone was revealed as well. Called the One UI, it's described as a clean and minimal design, keeping the most relevant content on the bottom of the screen for one-handed use. Before its official launch in January, Samsung is first making the One UI available to people in South Korea and the U.S. for beta testing in November. The software will be available in devices including the Galaxy S9, S9 Plus, and Galaxy Note 9. The conference provided opportunities for Samsung to garner opinions, as the new technologies will require developers to tweak apps to make sure they run smoothly when the new phone hits stores.
I think we've all been waiting for the foldable phone for at least a year now, so it was nice to actually see at a developer conference that there was specs, there was something being held, that there was an opportunity to really build for it, because it's not going to be exciting if there are no apps that work for it when it does come out.
Ko Ryun-hee, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines.
Washington announced on Thursday that the high-level talks between North Korea and the U.S. scheduled for later that day had been called off, citing scheduling issues. South Korea's foreign minister backed this explanation, but also seemed to confirm reports that it was North Korea who requested that the meeting be postponed. Our foreign ministry correspondent Lee Ji-won has this report.
In a meeting Thursday of Parliament's Foreign Affairs and Unification Committee, South Korea's Foreign Minister Kang said that according to the U.S., the North was the one to ask that the high-level meeting in New York be postponed. It did so, she said, because both sides' schedules were full. She added that there may have been some difficulty in terms of time, but that the State Department has publicly and definitively said that it will be held at a later date. This is in line with what the State Department's deputy spokesperson Robert Palladino said at a briefing on Wednesday, that the delay is purely a scheduling issue. Secretary Pompeo was to meet the head of North Korea's ruling Workers' Party Central Committee Kim Jong-un in New York on Thursday, but the State Department announced that it was postponed just the day before. Still, U.S. President Donald Trump appears confident that he will hold his second summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un early next year.
Sometime next year, I would say.
Sometime next year?
Sometime early next year.
At a press conference after midterm elections on Wednesday, President Trump fielded questions from reporters at the White House. He confirmed that the change in schedule was due to trips being made without much elaboration, and added that Washington is very happy with how it's going with Pyongyang. While emphasizing that he is in no rush, Trump also mentioned that the sanctions are still on and hinted that North Korea must also be responsive.
Now, I'd love to take the sanctions off, but they have to be responsive too. It's a two-way street. But we're not in any rush.
But there are concerns that the two sides could be heading for a stalemate again. Reports from South Korea and the U.S., citing foreign affairs sources, say that the meeting was actually postponed because the two sides could not resolve their differences. 이지원, Arirang News.
Now, joining us in the studio is Dr. Go Myung-hyun from the ASEAN Institute for Policy Studies. It's good to have you back on the show again.
It's my pleasure.
So the U.S. State Department has emphatically stated that the reason for the cancellation or postponement of the meeting between Pompeo and Kim Jong-un is simply a scheduling issue. Does that sound right?
Well, probably it's a scheduling issue because they need to reschedule this, but they cannot find a common date now. And probably there's a more important reason underlying it, just a simple scheduling stuff.
I mean, South Korean Foreign Minister also seemed to confirm reports that it was North Korea the ones who called off the talks. What does that tell us?
Well, I think clearly the underlying the scheduling issue is an important difference between the two sides about the pace of denuclearization on the part of North Korea, as well as what North Korea wants from the United States, which is relaxation of the sanctions. I think the two sides haven't been able to come to an agreement about the possible scheduling of relaxation of the sanctions or denuclearization steps that North Korea should be taking by now. So I think that's the reason why possibly for North Korea to send a signal to the United States that until the United States is ready to relax some of the sanctions measures, that North Korea is not going to engage in the United States diplomatically.
The Washington Post, which first reported that it was North Korea who might have cancelled in the first place, the reason they cited was saying that Kim Jong-un actually wanted to meet with Trump as well, but that Trump's schedule didn't fit because he had to go to Paris, and that without Kim Jong-un meeting Trump, they weren't going to meet. Does that sound right to you as well? I mean, could that be a reason why Kim decided to not come?
Well, if that's indeed true, that Kim Jong-un decided not to come to Washington because he wouldn't be able to meet with President Trump, that would be like the mirror image of what happened back in August when Pompeo was selected to go to Pyongyang, and then supposedly he canceled. I mean, he was forced to cancel by President Trump at the last minute because there's no guarantee that Secretary of State Pompeo will be meeting with Kim Jong-un. So I think in a way, North Korea is reciprocating what they did to Pompeo last time. So actually, the other way, what happened to them last time. So I think in that sense, there's some symmetry there. But I think still the underlying reason is it's beyond scheduling. It's about the pace of denuclearization.
So then these kind of cancellations, this pace of denuclearization that you talk about, then how concerning is it that these meetings keep getting delayed like this?
Well, it's just a negotiation tactic by both sides. I mean, we know that North Korea has used last-minute cancellation of a scheduled meeting as a way to pressure the other side to concede a negotiation point or like make a better offer. But this is the first time that we are seeing this on the American side. So I think, I mean, that's why there's a little bit of uncertainty about the future prospect of negotiation. But on the other hand, we have to take this as a natural aspect of negotiation between an unpredictable regime like in North Korea and an unpredictable U.S. president like President Trump.
So you don't think we should be frustrated by this at all? You think this meeting will happen at some point, but just that there'll be more power play along the line? Exactly.
I think we should be more patient in this regard. I mean, fundamentally, there are the matter of principle is very difficult to resolve. I mean, the pace of denuclearization is going to be slow, and I don't know whether that'll be satisfactory for the United States or South Korea, for that matter. But on the other hand, we still have to give diplomacy a chance, at least until the end of the year.
But critics would say, by having these kind of delays, it gives actually, I mean, North Korea a chance to stockpile weapons, and it's actually playing into North Korea's hands, because this gives them a reason to keep continuing its nuclear program. What do we say to those kind of criticisms?
Well, clearly there's a downside risk in which North Korea might be actually taking advantage of the delay to further perfect its WMD technology. But you have to remember that North Korea has already accumulated enough nuclear materials to build several dozens of nuclear warheads. And I think that they have enough deterrence capability against South Korea and the United States already. So building more weapons probably is not going to increase the threat profile of North Korea too much. So there's that issue. And another issue is that as long as they cannot test missiles, which is a very important component of their nuclear deterrence posture, it'll be difficult for North Korea to perfect the intercontinental ballistic missile technology that they need to develop deterrence against the United States. So in that sense, the test freeze, the missile test freeze and nuclear test freeze that North Korea is currently observing is actually reducing the risk of North Korea becoming a fully capable nuclear state. So in that, for that reason alone, I think there's some value in having North Korea refrain from further provocations in the form of testing, especially in the missile kind.
In a press conference after the midterm elections were announced, Trump also addressed some of these issues, and he reiterated that he is still looking to have a summit with Kim Jong-un sometime early next year, and he tried to be reassuring to the people that the negotiations with North Korea are ongoing, but that it's just going to take some time. So despite this postponement of this Pompeo-Kim Young-chul meeting in New York, I mean, how reassuring is it that Trump would say he seems quite cool about it and saying it's going to happen at some point?
Well, definitely it's actually reassuring that the U.S. president is willing to be patient about negotiating with North Korea. And I think underlying his patience is the fact that, the belief, that the sanctions, as long as they remain in place, is going to act as a pressure mechanism which will coerce North Korea to make a better offer to the United States. So I think that's what President Trump is counting on. So he probably believes that time is on his side. So, but then the downside to that kind of logic is that North Korea, if indeed it's true that the time is on the American side, or which means that time is against the North Korean side, the downside of that logic is that North Korea might lash out by starting the cycle of provocation that we observed in 2017. So there's a significant downside risk to this idea of holding back and wait for North Korea to make a better offer. But on the other hand, the upside of this is that we are going to enjoy some stability in the Korean Peninsula for the foreseeable future.
I mean, do you think there is this risk of lashing out? Because they've been building for the last year, improving relations with the U.S. and South Korea. Would they really risk all that?
No, I think so. I think, in a way, I don't think North Korea is in a happy place right now. There's a reason why they stopped their cycle of provocation earlier this year, and that they actually reached out diplomatically to South Korea and the United States. One objective was to be recognized as a nuclear state by the international community, but another more immediate objective was to have the sanctions lifted to an extent. And the fact that despite the North Korea's patience and discipline in not carrying out provocations, that they are not being rewarded, I think North Korea will be reaching a point soon in which they will think that the only language that the Washington understands is a language of provocations, and they'll try to shift the attention back to Pyongyang from where it is right now.
So what happens next? I mean, there's all these things about, the details about denuclearization, about getting inspectors into North Korea, and possibly North Korea wanting to ease sanctions and that kind of thing. Where are we at this point? Are we still some way off about any of this kind of things being resolved, or do you think it will happen quite quickly soon?
Well, all the things that we expect or would like to happen in the Korean Peninsula, such as further development of the inter-Korean dialogue, as well as inter-Korean economic cooperation, as well as the denuclearization, hinges upon what kind of denuclearization roadmap will emerge from the ongoing talks between North Korea and the United States. So it's not a linear process. It's actually a staggered process. So once we reach the threshold in which Pyongyang and Washington can agree on a possible roadmap, then I think it's going to allow a quantitative jump in the inter-Korean engagement, as well as the international engagement with North Korea. So until then, we'll be in this limbo.
And as you said, this limbo, the problem with this limbo is, though, there are other things that involved here as well. For example, at the height of the feel-good factor in North Korea relations, there was all this talk of a declaration to end the Korean War, a peace treaty even, and other inter-Korean economic projects. So are everything like this on hold while these two sides continue to hold off talks and have this tug of war?
Yeah, clearly it's not a linear process. It's unfortunate, but that's the fact. We have to wait until we see a breakthrough in the denuclearization roadmap between Pyongyang and Washington to see further expansion of the inter-Korean dialogue. So I think it's a kind of an objective by Washington to remind all the players, including South Korea, that denuclearization is first and foremost the most important issue when it comes to North Korea.
The other things seem to be being delayed as well. For example, the South Korean, no, it's not the South Korean, the Russian official recently just said that they were expecting Kim Jong-un to maybe meet Putin next year. Earlier last month, they were saying it was going to happen before the end of the year. So does this process, this difficulties with North Korea and the U.S. mean everything is being pushed back?
Exactly. I think even other players, such as China and Russia, despite their very strong anti-American rhetoric, deep down, actually, they observe the international sanctions regime against North Korea. They understand that they cannot really take the initiative in the Korean Peninsula without, or a successful initiative without the American agreement. So I think even from Russia's point of view, there's not much that Russia can do for North Korea at this point when there's no resolution on the denuclearization front. And the fact that a possible summit between Putin and Kim is possibly postponed until next year is a reflection of this dilemma.
And of course, the South Korean president invited Kim Jong-un to visit South Korea as well before the end of the year. Do you think that will also be delayed until a future date?
It's likely, because I think originally when President Moon and Kim Jong-un scheduled to have a Seoul summit, the fourth inter-Korean summit later this year, possibly in December. And the logic underlying it was that there will be a U.S. DPRK summit, the second one, in November after the midterm elections in the United States. Since there's the second U.S. DPRK summit, in which possibly there could have been a breakthrough in the denuclearization talks between the two countries, there's less need, there's less necessity for two sides to come to have another summit in Seoul, because there'll be not much to be discussed, such as expanding the inter-Korean economic engagement.
This announcement of the cancellation of the Pompeo-Kim Jong-chul's talks came just as the U.S. midterm elections were announced, the results of which. And of course, these talks were also put off until after the midterm elections were happening. And so it always seemed like the midterms, were important to these talks as well. But you don't think actually the results of the midterm elections had something to do with this talks being cancelled, do you?
I don't think so. The reason is because the outcome of the midterm election was widely expected, and So one expectation was that the Republicans would keep the Senate, but the House would flip to the Democrats, and that's exactly how the midterm election turned out to be. So the outcome of the midterm election was definitely in line with expectations. I think the North Koreans operated under the same assumption, and so there's no surprise with the midterm election. So the cancellation probably has little to do with the outcome of the midterm.
Well, I think that's where we have to wrap up here. So thank you for coming in as always, and it's always great to get your insights.
Thanks.
And that's all from me, but do stay tuned to Arirang for our later newscasts for the latest from Korea and around the world. Thank you for watching, and hope you can join us again next time. Goodbye.
(2018) Overseas TV Audience Survey. Arirang TV and Gallup Korea are conducting research on viewer opinions. Your honest answers will be used for the development of Arirang TV. From November 1st to the 24th, you can participate in the survey through our website, www.arirang.com.